Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished representative, I have the distinct honor on behalf of the sponsors, Nauru, Solomon Islands, and Tuvalu, and co-sponsors Samoa, Vanuatu, and Timor-Leste, to introduce draft resolution A/67/L56 Rev 1, entitled Self-Determination of French Polynesia, dated 1st March 2013 to the General Assembly under Agenda Item 60. Mr. President, Agenda Item 60 was left open in our December sitting of the General Assembly. We come to this principal organ of our multilateral organization because of our shared belief in it as chief deliberative and most representative body of our multilateral system. More importantly, this is the body that promotes fundamental freedom for all people. Historically, Mr. President, French Polynesia was inscribed by the administrating power on the original list by way of Resolution 66-1 of 1946, together with New Caledonia. This was done in compliance with the obligations under Chapter 10 of the UN Charter, Article 7E of Chapter 10, which requires the administrating power to provide the General Assembly with information on development towards full measure of self-government in these territories. 1 year later, in 1947, the General Assembly was no longer furnished with the information on French Polynesia, and subsequent list of non-self-governing territories published in 1963 was omitted. What amounted to a de facto removal of the French Polynesia and New Caledonia from the UN oversight occurred without concurrence of the General Assembly. It was not until 1986 that the General Assembly adopted Resolution 4141, which resumed international recognition that New Caledonia was a non-self-governing territory within the meaning of the UN Charter, which provided appropriate international oversight for legitimate process of self-determination. Accordingly, this Assembly adopts a resolution on New Caledonia each year in exercise of review in process of self-determination underway pursuant to the Nouméa Accord. Mr. President, 2 years ago, in June 2011, Council of Ministers of French Polynesia adopted a resolution seeking self-determination within the UN process. The Territories Assembly adopted the resolution in August of 2011. Support for this resolution enjoys wide international support at the highest political level. Within the Pacific region, leaders of the Pacific Forum registered their support for the principle of self-determination of French Polynesia as far back as 2004, and most recently in 2011 and 12 as well. Heads of the second engaging with the Pacific Conference in 2011 also made a similar call. The Polynesian Leaders Group pronounced themselves also on this issue. At global level, the Ministerial Non-Aligned Movement Coordinating Bureau in 2012 and the heads of the states and government of NAM in 2012 endorsed the right of self-determination for French Polynesia, specifically in accordance with the UN Charter and relevant resolutions of the General Assembly, including the landmark Decolonization Declaration. Discussions on the resolution have been around the corridors of the UN for a while. This includes informal consultations among member states. The resolution on self-determination of French Polynesia was initially taken up in 2011. At the end of the first year of consultation, there was a delay at the request of the administrating power because of its own national election, which were held in May 2012. While there is no organic link between national elections of an administrating power and the exercise of inalienable right of self-determination of the people of a territory, agreement was made in the interest of flexibility to postpone consideration at that time, and with the agreement to leave open the relevant agenda for consideration at the beginning of 2013. Accordingly, consultations continued with the UN members throughout 2013, and the text was published on L56 on the 7th of February 2013. This is followed by 2 informal meetings on the text of the UN with UN members. Emerging from this process was a revised text published on the 1st of March 2013, which took into account substantive recommendation offered by interested delegation. The text of the revised draft resolution is now tighter and consistent with agreed language of the 1986 resolution on New Caledonia. It was a wish and call to have the resolution tabled in March and again in April. This did not happen. We are, however, glad that it is now before us, before this Assembly. Mr. President, the spirit and purpose of the resolution is in compliance with established procedural practice of the General Assembly, which remains the ultimate authority to consider and refer self-determination of French Polynesia to the Fourth Committee on a matter that is within the scope of the Charter. Under Article 73E of the Charter, the administrative power is required to provide information on French Polynesia. As stated above, the last report was received 66 years ago. The resolution A/67/L56 Rev 1 is based on the principle that it is for the non-self-governing territory of French Polynesia to choose their future destiny in a just and fair process. The resolution sends a simple message of peace and hope to the population that want to determine their future. It is also registered in the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, and also the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, both entered into force in 1976. The matter of decolonization remains an unfinished business of the United Nations. In considering this resolution, three primary reference documents: the Charter of the United Nations, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the Declaration of Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. These documents provide a clear and solid foundation for a UN role and responsibility to peace and allow for an act of self-determination to be carried out. Mr. President, let me now respond to some of the misunderstandings generated by the campaign launched by our friend and partner, France. Outcome of elections on French Polynesia must never be equated with a referendum. It does not have any relevance to the inalienable right of the self-determination of the people of French Polynesia. L56 Rev 1 creates a process for non-self-governing territories population to determine their political future, be it sovereign independence, free association with the administrating power, maintaining the current status quo, or politically integrating itself with the administrating power. Mr. President, L56 Rev 1 provides a peaceful process, and it has the long-term interest of French Polynesia in all aspects. We, the sponsors and co-sponsors, call on all members to adopt the resolution by consensus. In doing so, to support the Charter and honor the decolonization declaration. We believe the decolonization process under the auspices of the United Nations is something most of us in this Assembly went through. As my predecessor, His Excellency, the late Francis Saimala, said in our national statement 27 years ago on the debate on New Caledonia, Resolution 4141, the decolonization saw the smooth attainment of many of our countries, including my own. The United Nations role gave the assurance that progress towards statehood and nation building were being pursued under the watchful eyes of the United Nations. It is in this regard we, the sponsors and co-sponsors, believe in our multilateral system then, and we do now with confidence, and once again call on everyone to support the principle of self-determination and adopt the draft resolution L56 Rev 1 before us by consensus. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Solomon Island, Ambassador Colin Beck, for his introduction. We shall now proceed to consider draft resolution A/67/L56/Rev 1 entitled Self-Determination of French Polynesia. In connection with draft resolution A/67/L56/Rev 1, I would like to give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. In connection with Draft Resolution A/67/L56, Revision 1, entitled Self-Determination of French Polynesia. I wish to put on the record the following statement of financial implications on behalf of the Secretary General, in accordance with Rule 153 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. In operative paragraph 2 of Draft Resolution A/67/L56, Revision 1, the Assembly would request the Special Committee on the situation with regard to the implementation of the Declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples to consider the question of French Polynesia at its next session and to report thereon to the General Assembly at its 68th session. In anticipation that the request contained in operative paragraph 2 for documentation would constitute an addition to the documentation workload of the Department for General Assembly and Conference Management for one document to be issued in all 6 languages annually, beginning with 2014. This would entail additional requirements for $101,800 for documentation services in the biennium 2014-2015. No provision has been included under the proposed program budget for the biennium 2014-2015 for the above activity, and as such, additional allocation of funds would be required. Accordingly, should the General Assembly adopt Draft Resolution A/67/L56, Revision 1, additional resources in the amount of $101,800 would be required under the program budget for the biennium 2014-2015 under Section 2, General Assembly and Economic and Social Affairs and Conference Management. This would require additional appropriations of $101,800 to be included in the program budget for the biennium 2014-2015. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Secretariat. The Assembly will now take a decision on Draft Resolution A/67/L56, Revision 1, entitled Self-Determination of French Polynesia. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. President. I should like to announce that since the submission of the draft resolution, in addition to those delegations listed on the L document, the following countries have also become co-sponsors of A/67/L56, Revision 1. Samoa, Timor-Leste, and Vanuatu. Thank you, Mr. President.
May I take it this Assembly decides to adopt Draft Resolution A/67/56/Revision 1. It is so decided. Before giving the floor to the speakers in explanation of vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of United Kingdom. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. The United Kingdom disassociates itself from consensus on this resolution. The United Kingdom's position on the United Nations decolonisation process is well known. We regret that the Decolonisation Committee continues with its outdated approach. In addition, on this particular resolution, the United Kingdom believes that it is not for the General Assembly to determine in any particular case that an obligation exists for a state to submit information under Article 73E of the United Nations Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative of United Kingdom. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Netherlands.
Mr. President, thank you for giving me the floor. We regret that the Kingdom of the Netherlands must disassociate itself from the consensus on the resolution self-determination of French Polynesia. The Kingdom of the Netherlands does support the inalienable right of the people of non-self-governing territories to self-determination. However, the General Assembly must adhere to the views expressed through democratic processes by the people of these non-self-governing territories, including French Polynesia. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Netherlands. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Monsieur le Président, je souhaite constater qu'en vue...
Mr. President, I would like to say that in light of the letter of President-elect Gaston Floss to the President of the Assembly, and in view of the resolution adopted yesterday, in which disavows the resolution of the General Assembly, Germany considers that the Assembly should not have continued to review the resolution contained in document L56 Rev 1. So Germany would like to dissociate itself from the consensus, and I would request the Secretary to please record this decision in the report of the meeting. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States strongly affirms the principle of self-determination enshrined in the United Nations Charter as one of the fundamental values of this organization. The facts in this case are clear. The people of French Polynesia, through their democratically elected representatives, have made clear that they do not support this resolution. The newly elected government, which takes office today, has notified the General Assembly that this resolution, quotes, ignores our autonomy and the will of our people, close quote. We are surprised that the co-sponsors have continued with General Assembly action on this resolution, given the will of the people it purportedly benefits. For these reasons, the United States disassociates itself from consensus on this resolution. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Mr. President, Mexico recognizes the inalienable right to self-determination of peoples. This is one of the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter in Article 1, Para 2. This has been reaffirmed by the United Nations General Assembly in its Resolution 2625. It is also recognized in Article 1 as one of the economic, social, and political rights. This right is also enshrined in the political constitution of Mexico as one of our guiding principles for our foreign policy. It is particularly because we apply this principle strictly that Mexico believes that in this case before us, we must guarantee the right of all interested parties to have their rights recognized. This is part of the equitable process among parties which the General Assembly is to ensure and to guarantee. Mexico would have preferred that we could have responded positively to the request of the authorities from French Polynesia involved in a democratic electoral process and which takes office today, and to postpone consideration of this issue until an official dialogue could have been begun with the authorities, the authors of this initiative, and with the General Assembly of the United Nations. For these reasons, the delegation of Mexico wishes to make it known that we have reservations with regard to the way in which this resolution is being adopted. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Argentina has joined consensus in favor of draft resolution A67L56 Rev 1 in favor of the right of self-determination of the people of French Polynesia in accordance with the Resolution 1514 and other relevant decisions of the General Assembly on decolonization. The draft resolution that has just been adopted clearly falls under Resolution 1541, 15, and other relevant resolutions of the General Assembly on decolonization. At the same time, Argentina considers that the Decolonization Committee is the appropriate forum for discussing issues related, covered in this draft resolution. We fully trust in the work carried out by the Special Committee on Decolonization. We understand that in this forum, the Polynesian people can express its views with regard to its status that it wishes to achieve. We are convinced that decolonization can only be a process that is supervised by the United Nations, in which the administrative powers fully take on the responsibility that they shoulder in order to achieve the goals set out in Resolution 1541-15. The reinsertion of French Polynesia, reinscription in the list of non-self-governing territories will certainly contribute to move forward according to the principles established by the United Nations for such cases. This position of principles is based on Argentina's firm commitment to the free determination of all peoples in all cases where the United Nations has plays a leading role in accordance with the relevant resolutions. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my delegation wishes to take the floor to explain briefly Indonesia's position on draft resolution A/66/L56/Rev1 that the Assembly has just adopted. The UN Charter declares that one of the purposes of the organization is to develop a friendly relation among states with respect to the principle of equal rights and self-determination of people. The right of self-determination is also one of the principles stipulated in Indonesia's national constitution. It is reflected in our foreign policy with the caveat that it cannot be construed as authorizing or encouraging any action which would dismember or impair totally or in part the territorial integrity or political unity of sovereign or independent states. Indonesia is of the view that the consideration of the question of French Polynesia during the next session of the Special Committee on Decolonization is solely based on a specific historical context and shall not set a precedent for those territories that used to be under the agenda of the Special Committee, but the status of which has already changed. Towards moving forward, we encourage the government of France and the French Polynesians to continue engaging in a constructive dialogue that would best serve the fundamental interests of the people of French Polynesia. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. We have heard the last speaker in explanation of vote. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Solomon Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me, on behalf of the sponsors and co-sponsors of the resolution, to thank all who have joined consensus on this particular resolution, and we also note those who have voted otherwise. We thank you all, and we look forward to working with both. We look forward to once again seeing the administrating power, France, and the non-self-governing territory, French Polynesia, to now begin to continue the work with, to continue the cooperation within the appropriate body. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Solomon Island. Now, may I take it that it is the wish of the General Assembly to conclude its consideration of agenda item 60. It is so decided. The General Assembly will now consider agenda item 35, entitled Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic. The General Assembly has before it a report of the Secretary General circulated in document A/67/802 and a draft resolution issued as document A/67/L64. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay to introduce draft resolution A/67/L64.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Señor,
Mr. President, as a representative of the country exercising the chairmanship of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic since January of this year, when we held the 7th ministerial meeting of the zone in Montevideo, I have the honor to introduce draft resolution A/67/L64, to which a slight amendment is being introduced, and that is the words "with appreciation" are to be deleted from the second operative paragraph. This is a text with its relevant technical updates, which is based on 2 previous resolutions on this matter adopted by consensus by the General Assembly in February of 2011 and October of 2007. And it includes a reference to one of the most important commitments taken at the Montevideo ministerial meeting related to the revitalization of the zone, and that is to encourage greater regularity and intensity of meetings which bring together leaders and experts of the countries on both sides of the South Atlantic. The draft resolution takes note of the recently published report by the Secretary General and the adoption of the Montevideo Declaration and Plan of Action. Both substantive documents were agreed to by members of the zone at the most recent ministerial meeting, and we hope that its results will represent an important milestone in our path toward achieving the objectives of the zone and revitalizing the zone. Similarly, this draft resolution reaffirms the role of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation as a forum which will allow for greater interaction and support among its member states, and in this regard, we welcome the interest expressed by a number of countries to provide opportunities and take advantage of opportunities for cooperation in various areas of work identified in the plan of action, such as mapping and exploration of the seabed, protection and preservation of the marine environment and its resources, air and maritime transport, combating organized crime, the maintenance of peace, facilitating trade, to mention but a few. In this regard, on behalf of the members of the zone, I wish to invite the various organizations, bodies, funds and programs of the United Nations, as well as other institutions and bilateral stakeholders, to support the efforts which the countries of the zone are carrying out in order to implement the objectives for the zone, in particular the Montevideo Plan of Action. Finally, I should like to take this opportunity to congratulate the delegation of Angola outgoing chairman of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic, for the outstanding work done. Uruguay is committed to the process of revitalizing the zone, and we hope to be able to hand over the chairmanship in Cape Verde in 2015 with a consolidated agenda and with clear-cut results. The delegation of Uruguay wishes to express its thanks for the support of all delegations to this draft resolution, and in particular to the co-sponsors of the draft. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay, Ambassador Cancela. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina. You have the floor, sir.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Assembly, good morning. Argentina is proud to be the co-sponsor of this draft resolution that has just been introduced by Uruguay. We do it based on the conviction that the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic is extremely important. This is an initiative established in 1986 by the authorities of Brazil with the support of my own country. As I had a chance to already say, the government of Argentina at the recent ministerial meeting of the zone held in Montevideo in last January, we not only highlighted the importance of issues important to the countries of the region. The importance has not become less important, but rather has continued to be extremely important. In particular, the determination to overcome the difficulties that still need to be overcome in order to uphold the ideals of cooperation in this area, and overcoming the legacy of the Cold War, as well as taking advantage of the potential of cooperation amongst developing countries. We thank the government of Uruguay for holding the very fruitful Montevideo meeting. At that meeting we were able to adopt very substantive documents and approve concrete proposals in order to give a new impetus and revitalize the zone. Mr. President, a key fundamental characteristic of this zone is that this is based on a strategic relationship between amongst peers. This is an initiative that makes it possible to connect the two sides of the South Atlantic and to take advantage of the opportunities for cooperation between the two regions, which have where there's a great potential to coordinate and to further promote their relations. Now, the common belonging to this region is proved by the relative ease with which the countries of the region were able to reach common positions on issues in the international agenda. At the Montevideo statement, we see a clear convergence of visions on issues that continue to be extremely sensitive, such as the need to continue combating colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. And in the statement we expressed a continued concern for situations that have a negative impact on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of certain member states of the region, and also supporting their efforts in promoting the principles of peaceful resolution of conflicts and the attempt to find negotiated solutions to territorial conflicts that affect them. Also on such issues as sustainable development and climate change, or the importance attached to oceanic and marine resources, amongst others. The convergence of views of countries of the region is a reality. Now, given the importance of this zone, not only as a zone of peace and cooperation, but a zone free from nuclear weapons. And this is an effort that is part and parcel of the movement towards peace that, in fact, led to the birth of the United Nations as a whole and various regional and sub-regional organizations to which the states of the region belong to. This is why Argentina considers it appropriate that even those countries that are not located in the area, in the zone, maintain a respectful posture with regard to the aims of peace and eradication of weapons of mass destruction that the countries of the area strive for, as well as in dealing with such issues as drug trafficking and other main issues. These are challenges that have been identified by countries in the region that for which a solution needs to be found without interference from countries in other regions. It's essential to find appropriate solutions that reflect the multidisciplinary and multidimensional scale of the challenges. Mr. President, the Plan of Action in Montevideo translates once again the political determination and translates them in concrete measures, recognizing the variety of sectors where a potential for South-South cooperation was identified. I'd like to highlight cooperation planned in the area of mapping, preservation and conservation of the marine environment, marine sciences, air and maritime transport, port security, defense, public security, and combating transnational organized crime, amongst others. We think that it's essential to work on concrete cooperation projects among countries in the region. This is why Argentina identified a number of proposals and concrete projects that were included in the Montevideo Plan of Action to in fact, this was a very important step in this process. Mr. President, to conclude, Argentina has made available to the other members of the zone cooperation programs that is reflected in the latest report of the Secretary General. These initiatives, what am I referring to? Well, cooperation in the area of science and innovation, industry, agriculture, defense cooperation, security, as well as cooperation in the area of determining the external limits of the continental shelf, and amongst other issues. In conclusion, we'd like to support your support for this regional initiative, which embodies the active commitment of both sides of the South Atlantic with a view to social and economic development and the promotion of human rights, international law, peace, and international security. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Argentina. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 27 years ago, Brazil proudly participated in the establishment of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic by this General Assembly. The initiative at that time constituted an innovative commitment between African and South American countries towards the creation of a South Atlantic identity. For my country, it's now clear that the founding principles of the zone remain as important as in 1986. The consolidation of the South Atlantic region as a zone of peace, free from nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, embraces the promotion of sustainable development and South-South cooperation. It is a contribution to the recognition of the central role that developing countries play in the world today. The convening of the 7th Ministerial Meeting of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic in Montevideo, Uruguay, on the 15th and 16th of January this year enabled us, member states of the zone, to pursue our efforts aiming at the revitalization of the zone and at deepening cooperation among the members. In this regard, it is my pleasure to congratulate the government of Uruguay for having successfully organized and hosted this meeting, and to thank them and the Uruguayan people for their kind hospitality. Mr. President, as South America and Africa's participation in world dynamics grows, the South Atlantic will gain relevance not only as a busy commercial route or as a reservoir of valuable natural and mineral resources, but also as the expression of our commitment to the pursuit of economic and social development within the bounds of sustainability of our countries. The members of the zone would like to count on the international community for strengthening the zone in all its aspects. Our endeavors are guided by social justice, cooperation, and long-lasting peace. Brazil strongly believes that a permanent dialogue can prevent conflict, and this is the very meaning of the term zone of peace. To achieve the goals of peace and cooperation, social and economic inclusivity must be at the core of our actions. Cooperation among the members of the zone should therefore be intense and wide-ranging, including areas such as the rational use of energy resources, sustainable and rational use of marine resources, facilitation of trade and investment, sustainable management of coastal areas, exchange of experts in marine scientific research and education. The zone is a promising area of economic growth and prosperity with fast-growing economies which can contribute to a future of development and increasing trade among its members. African and South American member states of the zone are bound by a common cultural heritage and by strong historical ties. Yet, we are determined to deepen mutual knowledge and to better work together towards our established goals. Mr. President, during the 7th Ministerial Meeting of the Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic, our ministers reinforced their commitments to push for increased cooperation among the member states, building on undertakings agreed at the ministerial meeting held in Luanda in 2007 and at the roundtable held in Brasilia in 2010. The Montevideo Declaration and Plan of Action adopted in the Montevideo meeting will serve as valuable guidelines to our future cooperation initiatives. In the ministerial declaration issued at Montevideo meeting, member states renewed their commitments and exchanged views on multiple important issues such as global governance, development, economic and financial issues, disarmament, peace and security, defense, sustainable development and climate change, oceans and marine resources, and international crime. The Montevideo Plan of Action contains provisions for a number of themes for cooperation among member states of the zone, including cooperation on mapping and exploring of the seabed, on protection and preservation of the marine environment, on marine research, on air and maritime transportation, maritime safety and security, public security and transnational organized crime, as well as on capacity building. I thank you very much and count on the international community to help us strengthen these goals. Thank you. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil. We have heard the last speaker in the debate on this item. The Assembly will now take a decision on draft resolution A/67/L64 entitled Zone of Peace and Cooperation of the South Atlantic as orally revised. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I should like to announce that since the submission of the draft resolution, and in addition to those delegations listed on the L document, the following countries have also become co-sponsors of A/67/L64: Benin, Cameroon, Cape Verde, Congo, Guinea-Bissau, Montenegro, Sao Tome and Principe, Senegal, Spain, Togo, and Turkey. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, the distinguished representative Secretary. May I take it that it is the wish of the General Assembly to adopt draft resolution A/67/L64 as orally revised? It is so decided. Before giving the floor to the speakers in explanation of vote, may I remind delegations that the explanation of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of United Kingdom. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United Kingdom welcomes the continuing cooperation between states in the zone of peace and cooperation of the South Atlantic. But the United Kingdom would like to place on record that it strongly disagrees with certain elements of the Montevideo Declaration. This includes the false claim that the United Kingdom is violating General Assembly Resolution 31/49 through the development of so-called illegitimate hydrocarbon exploration activities in the Falkland Islands, South Georgia Islands, South Sandwich Islands, and the surrounding maritime areas, and the reinforcement of its military assets in the South Atlantic. The United Kingdom notes in this context that operative paragraph 2 of this resolution takes note of the adoption of the Montevideo Declaration, and that it does not therefore express the General Assembly's approval of the content of that declaration. The United Kingdom would like to take this opportunity to reiterate its well-known position on the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. The United Kingdom has no doubt about its sovereignty over the Falkland Islands or South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands and the surrounding maritime areas of these territories. The principle of self-determination enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations underlies the position of the United Kingdom on the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islanders have the right to self-determination and the right to develop their economy, including developing their natural resources for their own economic benefit. The United Kingdom unequivocally supports that right. The Falkland Islanders have made their views clear in the recent referendum when they voted overwhelmingly in support of retaining their constitutional links with the United Kingdom. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. We have heard the last speaker in the explanation of vote. One representative requested to exercise right of reply. May I remind members that statements in the exercise of the right of reply are limited to 10 minutes for the first intervention and to 5 minutes for the second intervention, and should be made by delegations from their seats. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina.
Gracias. Thank you, Mr. President. In response to the views expressed by the United Kingdom on the question of the Malvinas, the delegation of Argentina reiterates in all terms the statement which was made by the President of Argentina before the Special Decolonization Committee on the 14th of June 2012 and before the General Assembly on the 25th of September last. The government of Argentina recalls that the Malvinas, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands and the surrounding maritime areas are an integral part of the national territory of Argentina, and that they are being illegally occupied by the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and they are the subject of a sovereignty dispute between both these countries, which is recognized by a number of international organizations. The illegal occupation exercised by the United Kingdom was put to the General Assembly of the United Nations, and 2065, 3160, 31/49, and 37/938/2, 39/6, 40/21, 41/41, 41/49, and 43/25 were adopted by the General Assembly, and all of them recognize the existence of the sovereignty dispute referring to the issue of the Malvinas, and urges the government of Argentina and of the United Kingdom to resume negotiations in order to find, as soon as possible, a peaceful and lasting solution to the dispute. For its part, the Decolonization Committee has repeatedly stated the same, more recently through the resolution adopted on the 14th of June 2012. Similarly, the General Assembly of the Organization of American States adopted on the 5th of June 2012 a new declaration on the issue in similar terms. Argentina regrets the fact that the government of the United Kingdom is attempting to delay moving forward on this as a result of the act of usurpation in 1833. There have been continued and ongoing protests by Argentina as a result of this, and these delaying tactics also underscore the clear lack of certainty of the United Kingdom with regard to what they consider to be their rights over the Malvinas. Argentina reiterates that the principle of self-determination of peoples, which is the sole element which the United Kingdom bases its alleged rights on, and which is referred to by the United Kingdom exclusively with regard to the Malvinas, is clearly inapplicable to this dispute between the two countries with regard to sovereignty over the Malvinas, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. The Republic of Argentina regrets the fact that the United Kingdom continues irresponsibly to generate expectations among the inhabitants of the Malvinas. By referring to an illegal vote which has not changed, nor will it change, the underlying issue of the Malvinas and its results, does not put an end to, nor will it put an end to, the sovereignty dispute, nor to the unquestionable rights of Argentina. Similarly, the Republic of Argentina rejects the illegitimate unilateral actions taken by the United Kingdom in the disputed area, which include the development of hydrocarbon activities and even military activity in clear contravention of by the international community in Resolution 31/49 by the General Assembly. Mr. President, the Republic of Argentina reaffirms its legitimate rights of sovereignty over the Malvinas, South Georgia Islands and South Sandwich Islands, and the surrounding maritime areas, which are an integral part of the national territory of Argentina. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. In response to the last comment from the representative of Argentina, I would like to make clear that the United Kingdom defends the Falkland Islanders' right to decide their own future, the right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN Charter and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This is a fundamental human right for all peoples. There are three parties to this debate, not just two, as Argentina likes to pretend. The islanders cannot simply be written out of history. As such, there can be no negotiations on the sovereignty of the Falkland Islanders unless and until the islanders so wish. Argentine government's public comments denying the Falkland Islanders' existence and declining to meet them face to face, while at the same time calling for discussions, are hypocritical and out of step with the 21st century. The United Kingdom has administered the Falkland Islands peacefully and effectively for nearly 180 years. Some of the people on the islands can trace their Falklands ancestry back through 9 generations, longer than many South Americans can trace back their own family roots in their countries. We want to have a full and friendly relationship with Argentina as neighbours in the South Atlantic and as responsible fellow members of the G20. But we will not negotiate away the human and political rights of the Falkland Islands people against their will or behind their backs. Thank you.
I now call on the representative of Argentina on a second intervention, but I remind that it must not exceed more than 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. With regard to what was said by the United Kingdom on the Malvine Islands, the delegation of Argentina reiterates in all its terms the intervention that we recently made and the intervention made by the President of Argentina in the Special Committee on Decolonization on 14 June 2012 and at the General Assembly on September 25th, 2012. Argentina regrets that the British government is trying to delay with regard to its historic responsibilities and trying to dissimulate the act of usurpation that occurred in 1833. We want to insist that as a country committed to human rights, Argentina respects the right to free determination. However, the solution to the sovereignty dispute does not depend on the result of a vote in which the subjects of the British Crown will express their view on their wish to remain British, to allow the British inhabitants of the territory to be the arbiters of a dispute to which their own country is a party, in fact undermines the right of free determination of peoples because this is we're talking about there is no people that is subject to colonial occupation. Argentina would like to recall that we've called on the discussion of resolution of the issue of sovereignty, and we've called on negotiations between Argentina and the United Kingdom, taking into account the interests of the inhabitants of the region, and have excluded the application of the principle of free determination on the issue of the Malvinas. Hence, the Republic of Argentina reaffirms its legitimate right of sovereignty over the Malvinas, South Georgia Islands and South Sandwich Islands, as well as the surrounding maritime areas that are part of Argentinian national territory. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
May I take it that it is the wish of the Assembly to conclude its consideration of Agenda Item 35? It is so decided.